Melania Trump never set out to make headlines that day. It was supposed to be a quiet visit, just her, a small team, and a brief stop in a little town nestled far from the chaos of Washington, D.C. This town, forgotten by most and struggling with its fair share of challenges, had been living under a cloud for years. The factories had shut down, the Main Street shops had long ago boarded up their windows, and families had started to leave in search of better opportunities. The hope that once defined the heart of this tight-knit community had dimmed, flickering like a candle in a storm. But all that was about to change with one simple act. The former First Lady's arrival wasn't met with fanfare or a parade. There were no cameras or flashing lights, just a handful of locals gathered outside the community center, unsure of what to expect. Melania's visits had always carried an air of quiet dignity, and this was no different. She stepped out of the car, her signature poise unshaken, and greeted the small group with a warm smile. For a moment, her presence felt like an ordinary encounter, another celebrity showing up to check a box. But what happened next left everyone speechless. The people in this town weren't used to being seen, let alone heard. Years of economic downturn had left scars on their streets, their homes, and most painfully, their spirits. The only headlines they'd made in the past decade had been about what they'd lost, not what they'd built. Yet Melania, in her quiet way, seemed to sense that this place held something special, something that couldn't be measured by statistics or judged by appearances. As she stepped inside the modest community center, she didn't just see peeling paint and outdated furniture. She saw potential. What caught her attention first was a group of children gathered in one corner, coloring on scraps of paper. Their laughter, though faint, was genuine. Their drawings were bright and full of life, a stark contrast to the grayness outside. One little girl approached her shyly, clutching a picture she'd drawn of her family and their tiny house. Melania knelt down, her eyes meeting the child's, and asked her to explain the picture. As the girl spoke, her words painted a vivid picture of resilience, of a family holding on to hope despite the odds stacked against them. It was in that moment, unexpected, unplanned, that something shifted. Melania didn't give a speech or make a grand announcement. Instead, she leaned into the quiet strength of the people around her and asked a simple question. What do you need most right now? The answers came hesitantly at first. Better schools, job opportunities, support for the elderly. But as the conversation grew, so did the courage of those speaking. For the first time in a long time, these people felt heard. What Melania did next seemed, at first, like a small gesture. She promised to help revitalize the town's community center, turning it into a hub where families could gather, learn, and grow. It wasn't a flashy promise. It didn't involve millions of dollars or sweeping reforms. But to the people of this town, it was everything. It was a lifeline, a symbol of hope, and a reminder that someone, somewhere, believed in them. News of her visit began to spread, first within the town, and then far beyond. It wasn't just what she had promised to do that resonated. It was the way she did it, with humility, kindness, and a genuine desire to make a difference. People started talking about the Melania effect, a term coined by locals to describe the ripple of optimism that began to spread after her visit. The community center project sparked something much bigger, a movement of neighbors coming together, businesses reconsidering their investments in the area, and outsiders taking notice of a town they'd once overlooked. But as the town began to rebuild, questions lingered. Would this momentum last? Could one gesture, no matter how meaningful, truly turn things around? And what was it about Melania's visit that had such a profound impact on people who had almost given up hope? These are the questions we'll explore as we dive deeper into this incredible story. Because while one small town may have been the setting, the lessons learned here go far beyond its borders. What happened next wasn't just about brick and mortar or dollars and cents. It was about something much more powerful, rediscovering the strength of community, the courage to dream, and the belief that even the smallest gestures can ignite a spark of hope. But how did a simple promise lead to such a dramatic transformation? And what role did the people of the town play in their own revival? The answers will surprise you, and perhaps inspire you. Stay with us as we unravel the story of how Melania Trump's unexpected visit to a struggling town set in motion a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Because sometimes all it takes is one gesture, one moment of kindness to change everything. The little town, tucked away in a valley surrounded by rolling hills, had a name most people couldn't place on a map. Once upon a time, it had been a bustling center of industry. The factory whistle would blow every morning, signaling the start of a workday for generations of families who had built their lives here. Back then, the streets were alive with activity. Shops selling handmade goods, diners filled with laughter, and a sense of pride in the air. But those days had faded like an old photograph. The factory shut down, and with it went the jobs, the income, and eventually, the spirit of the town. When Melania Trump visited, the town was at its lowest point. People weren't just struggling to make ends meet. They were struggling to hold on to their identity. For years, they had watched as opportunities dried up and their brightest young minds packed their bags, never to return. The town school had been forced to cut programs, leaving kids with few outlets for creativity or ambition. Main Street was a shadow of what it once was, with for sale and closed signs marking almost every storefront. Even the annual town fair, once the highlight of the year, had been canceled for the past 3 summers due to lack of funds. Behind every boarded-up shop and every struggling family was a story. Take Grace, for example. A single mom who'd grown up in the town and once dreamed of opening her own bakery. When the factory closed, her plans fell apart. She worked 2 part-time jobs just to keep her 2 kids fed and clothed. But every time she passed the empty storefronts on Main Street, she felt that familiar pang of what could have been. Or consider Mr. Franklin, the retired schoolteacher who spent his evenings fixing up bikes for local kids, just to keep them out of trouble. He'd lived through the town's highs and lows, but even he admitted that the future looked bleak. The conflict wasn't just about economics, it was about hope. How do you convince people to dream again when they've been let down so many times? That's what made Melania's visit feel different. She wasn't promising a quick fix or a miracle solution. Instead, she was offering something much harder to come by, a reason to believe that change was possible. As news of her promise to renovate the community center spread, the town started to buzz with cautious optimism. The community center, after all, had once been the heart of the town. Decades ago, it was where people gathered for weddings, town meetings, and holiday celebrations. It was where kids learned to dance, parents shared stories, and neighbors came together to help one another. But over time, it had fallen into disrepair. Its roof leaking, its walls cracked, its once vibrant rooms now empty and cold. Melania's gesture had the power to bring it back to life, but not without challenges. Some residents were skeptical. They'd seen promises before, politicians, developers, and philanthropists who had swooped in with big ideas, only to disappear when the going got tough. Others worry that even if the community center was rebuilt, it wouldn't be enough to solve the deeper problems plaguing the town. But there were also those who dared to hope. A small group of locals began meeting at the diner on Thursday nights, brainstorming ways they could support the project. Grace was one of them. Inspired by her dream of opening a bakery, she volunteered to organize bake sales to raise additional funds. Mr. Franklin, despite his bad knees, offered to repaint the center's walls when the time came. Even the high schoolers, who were often dismissed as apathetic, pitched in by creating flyers and spreading the word on social media. As the weeks went on, something remarkable started to happen. The project became a catalyst for a larger movement. Businesses that had long ignored the town began to take notice. A local construction company offered to donate materials for the renovations. A group of artists from a nearby city volunteered to create murals for the center, turning its walls into a canvas of hope and resilience. The town's sense of pride, buried for so long under layers of disappointment, began to resurface. But as progress continued, tensions also bubbled beneath the surface. Not everyone was on board with the changes. Some feared that the attention the town was receiving might lead to outsiders coming in and altering its character. Others resented what they saw as a focus on the community center, while other pressing issues, like the lack of jobs and affordable housing, went unaddressed. At one town meeting, a heated debate broke out over whether the project was a distraction from more urgent problems. Voices were raised, accusations flew, and for a moment, it seemed like the fragile sense of unity that had begun to form might shatter. Adding to the tension was the pressure of time. Winter was approaching, and the community center's renovations needed to be completed before the weather made construction impossible. The town's resources were limited, and while Melania's team had promised support, much of the work depended on the community coming together to make it happen. Every delay, every obstacle, felt like a blow to the momentum they had built. Then came an unexpected twist. A journalist from a major news outlet got wind of the story and decided to write a feature about the town's transformation. At first, the town was wary. They didn't want their struggles to be turned into a spectacle or their efforts to be overshadowed by sensational headlines. But when the article was published, it struck a chord far beyond the town's borders. Donations began pouring in from people across the country, some small, others substantial, but all carrying messages of encouragement and solidarity. The story had touched a nerve, reminding people of the power of community and the importance of hope. Still, the question lingered. Would it be enough? As the renovation neared its final stages, the stakes felt higher than ever. The community had come so far, but the finish line was still uncertain. Would the project succeed in bringing the town together, or would the weight of old divisions and new challenges prove too much to overcome? And what role would Melania herself play in the final chapter of this unfolding story? The town stood on the brink of something extraordinary, but whether it would be a breakthrough or a breaking point was a question no one could answer, yet. As the first snowfall of the season dusted the rooftops and blanketed the hills, the renovation of the community center reached its final stages. Inside, volunteers worked tirelessly to complete the last touches, hanging curtains, setting up tables, and sweeping the floors. The air buzzed with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. This building, once a crumbling symbol of the town's decline, now stood as a beacon of what could be possible when people came together. Yet, even as the community prepared for the grand reopening, doubts lingered in the background. Would it truly live up to the expectations? Would this effort make a lasting difference, or would it be another fleeting glimmer of hope? Then came an unexpected turn. Just days before the grand reopening, word spread that Melania Trump herself would be returning to the town for the event. At first, the news was met with disbelief. Why would someone like her, with all her commitments and responsibilities, make time for a town so small? But sure enough, the confirmation came, sparking a whirlwind of preparation. For many, her return wasn't just about the event. It was a validation of their hard work and a reminder that they mattered. The day of the reopening arrived, bringing with it a rare winter sun that seemed to cast everything in a golden glow. Families bundled in scarves and coats gathered outside the newly refurbished building, their breath visible in the crisp air. Grace had spent the morning baking dozens of cookies, which she handed out to children as they waited. Mr. Franklin stood near the entrance, leaning on his cane, his eyes misty with pride as he watched the scene unfold. It felt like the entire town had turned out, drawn together by a sense of shared accomplishment. When Melania's car pulled up, a quiet hush fell over the crowd. She stepped out wearing a simple yet elegant coat and waved to the gathering with a warm smile. Her presence, once again understated yet powerful, seemed to command the attention of everyone present. As she walked toward the building, she paused to greet residents, asking about their lives, and thanking them for their contributions to the project. For a moment, it wasn't about titles or status. It was about people connecting as equals, bound by a shared vision of something better.